A damning report from the National Audit Office says the government's flagship benefit scheme, Universal Credit, is not delivering value for money and has been too slow to roll out and is causing financial hardship. Almost 1 million people currently receive the benefit, around 10% of the final number expected to be claiming it by 2023. Joshua Redaway from the NAO said there was strong evidence that some claimants were turning to food banks or getting into debt.
They're struggling to cope whilst they wait for their first payment, and they're struggling to cope with the fluctuating income that they get on Universal Credit. This isn't made easier by the fact that the department's not paying everybody on time. In fact, 1 in 5 people are not receiving everything that they're due on time, and 1 in 20 are still waiting for their full payment 5 months after they make their original claim.
Ministers say Universal Credit is good value for money and significant improvements have been made to its delivery.
Thanks, Helen. 6:07 is the time. Front pages and indeed a couple of the inside pages now. The costly and unwieldy facts about Universal Credit are revealed on the front page of The Guardian. These are this is a report from the National Audit Office we'll be talking about later on in the programme. That, The Guardian says, in effect demolishes ministerial claims for Universal Credit, concluding that the much-delayed flagship welfare project may cost more than the benefit system that it replaces and is unlikely to ever deliver value for money. The NAO report, The Guardian says, paints a devastating picture of a system which, despite more than £1 billion in investment, 8 years of development and a much-hyped digital-only approach to transforming welfare, is still in many respects unwieldy, inefficient and reliant on basic manual processes.
And the new system of Universal Credit, Justin was talking about it in the papers a moment ago, has been given a roasting by the National Audit Office. Michael Buchanan is our social affairs correspondent. They've really taken it apart, Michael.
They have really taken it apart, and this is, of course, the spending watchdog, an independent group that goes in and evaluates government programmes. And what they have done is look at it from top to bottom and found numerous problems with it. Essentially, we already knew that it was years behind schedule, and we already knew that the government had been forced to write off tens and tens of millions of pounds initially because of problems with the IT system it was trying to build up. But what the National Audit Office has come out today and said is effectively, in some ways, confirmed what a lot of claimants and action groups have been saying, that they have seen evidence that there are long delays for the first payment. I mean, last year, for instance, 40% of claimants didn't get their first payment for 11 weeks. 8% waited nearly 8 months for it. They've also said they've seen evidence that the use of food banks rises more rapidly in areas where Universal Credit is rolled out to, so do rent arrears as well. But at the same time, they say the Department for Work and Pensions, who oversee this programme, do not accept that it causes hardship. And the NAO goes on to say that they have shown insufficient sensitivity to the difficulties that this policy is creating for some of the claimants.
Did they find anything good about it?
They say there have been some improvements in the delivery of the programme over the years, but essentially their overall conclusion is that it's not providing value for money at the moment. That one of the more overarching achievements that the programme was set up to do, which is to put 200,000 additional people into employment. They say the department will never know whether that's the case or not. And they go on to say that whilst there are all these difficulties with it, they're not calling for it to be scrapped, because frankly, the department have spent nigh on £2 billion on it already. They've changed the entire department and the way they deliver benefits in order to make this work. And so they say, well, we might as well continue with it anyway. The government, for their part, of course, are saying that they will provide value for money and that they are building a flexible, person-centred benefit fit for the 21st century.
Thank you, Michael. Boring, really. 11 minutes to 7 now. When the Universal Credit system was announced a few years ago, the government said it would be much more efficient than the old system of welfare benefits. It would get more people into work and it would cost less. Instead of the old benefits, 6 of them, there would be just the one. But the National Audit Office has just pronounced that it hasn't worked that way. And I'm joined in the studio by Joshua, I beg his pardon, Joshua Redaway, who is the National Audit Office's Director of Work and Pensions Value for Money Programme, and also on the line by Rebecca Smidmore, who receives Universal Credit. And let me ask you first, if I may, Ms. Smidmore, what has happened to you? Why did you need some form of benefit in the first place?
Hi, John. Well, I was actually on a few of the legacy benefits, and we moved house into a Universal Credit area, which then prompted the changeover. So we applied, and I had to do a lot of research to actually understand it in the first place, really. It is quite confusing, and it has only taken me nearly a year now that I've been on it, that I understand my part of it. There are so many different parts of it.
Right, but apart from it being complicated, because you're a full-time carer, as I understand it, for your disabled son.
Yes, I am.
And what has it meant that you've lost any money, or you had to wait a long time to get the money, or what?
Essentially, we receive the same amount of money every month. Essentially, if I average it out. The issue here is that my husband works, so he gets a wage, and Universal Credit give you an assessment period where they assess what you get from wages within that time. My husband's payday from work is very close to our assessment period, so if he's paid 1 or 2 days early because of the weekend, then they think he's earned double the amount.
Oh.
So in that case, our Universal Credit is heavily reduced. We don't then qualify for free prescriptions or dental treatment, which we would do normally.
Right. And it seems random, you say, because you could get £1,000 a month, but sometimes it might be only 300 and no backdated payments.
No backdated payments. We waited 5 weeks for our payment, which from what I've heard is actually good. 5 weeks. There have been many people that have waited a lot longer.
Makes it very difficult to budget. It
does make it very difficult to budget, and I've just now, after nearly a year, just got the hang of it. It is difficult trying to budget when you're not quite sure what's coming in, and we have to put money aside to make sure that when we only get a little amount from Universal Credit, that we can survive.
Right, but would you prefer to go back to the old system?
Definitely.
You would.
Definitely.
But Joshua Redaway, the NAO is not saying go back to the old system. You're not saying scrap this one.
No, we're not saying scrap it, we're saying that the department should get it right. But we're now into the 8th year of rolling it out, and we had expected that by now the Department for Work and Pensions should be able to demonstrate that it's working. Instead, we've had to conclude that it's not value for money, and we're not sure that it ever will be. And
what we've just heard from Rebecca suggests that I mean, that is typical, is it? Well, I suppose nothing is typical because all cases are a bit different, but...
There are lots of different things we've heard, but it's not atypical of the sort of thing we've heard from the organisations that work with claimants up and down the country.
And we have heard endlessly from government that the one clear benefit is that more people are now going into work than claiming benefits. I mean, there has been a big increase in the number of people coming off benefits and going into work. Is that not the case?
Well, the department wants Universal Credit to get an extra 200,000 people into work. It's therefore, we felt quite unfortunate that it's now concluded that it won't be able to measure exactly how many people are going into work as a result of Universal Credit.
Right, so it might be 200,000?
Well, it might be a number that go in. It might be fewer people that go in. They can't measure it.
Why not?
It's technical issues to do with the economic modelling, but essentially they can't isolate the impact of Universal Credit from other economic factors.
But they would know, if somebody stops claiming benefit, they would know that they had stopped claiming benefit. You'd think it'd be easy enough to add up those people.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. There are various things they can measure. There are various things they should have measured by now. In fact, they had a programme that was due to report a year ago that did that sort of measurement. Even if they did do that, and they do hope to be able to do that in future, it falls short of proving that Universal Credit's actually created more jobs. And that's because just because an individual that's been on Universal Credit may or may not be more likely to go in, other people may come out, and there's different effects.
But is it possible to say, look, yeah, it has taken longer than they'd expected, but it may well be, if you did another audit in 1 year from now or 2 years from now, that all those things they had hoped for have in fact come true?
Well, we really hope that this programme will work. We're not trying to say that it definitely won't, but what we are saying is they should have been able to demonstrate by now that it is value for money, and they've not been able to do that. In particular, there's a real risk that it will actually end up costing more than the benefit system that it's replaced, and they will never be able to prove that it's actually had the desired impact of getting everybody into work.
Joshua Redaway, Rebecca Smithmore, thank you both very much.
The government has spent well over £1 billion on universal credit, but it doesn't work properly, and it is unlikely to work properly anytime soon. This is not an attack from opponents of the scheme, it's what the National Audit Office says. Remember, universal credit is the system that rolls up a number of benefits, including job seekers allowance, housing benefit, tax credits as well, into one single payment. It's meant to make it simpler and easier for claimants. It's meant to save money, and it's meant to encourage work. The Employment Minister, Alex Sharma, is on the line. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
One of the things the NAO found is that last year, 40% of claimants had to wait 11 weeks before they got their first payment. Why is that happening?
Well, if you look at the figures that have also been acknowledged by the NAO, Justin, it shows that 80% of new claimants were paid in full, and 90% of them were paid either in full or in part.
But they were paid late.
And actually, where claimants were not being paid in full, that was often due to not having verified costs such as housing and childcare costs.
Hang on a second. 40%.
We have to be fair.
Can we just get this straight? 40% of those making their first claim were not paid for 11 weeks. Now, these are people who are often desperately, desperately poor. They don't have savings. My question to you is a simple one. Why is that happening?
Well, Justin, I think what the report from the NAO also acknowledges is that we have seen a significant increase over the last year in terms of payment rates. And that's why, as I said to you, right now, 80% of new claims are paid in full.
Yes, but why are 40% of claimants waiting 11 weeks? Why?
Well,
what's going wrong?
I've just said to you that 80% are paid right now in full on time. And what we have also done recently is introduced additional support for people, another £1.5 billion worth of measures, which means that people are able to get 100% advances of their first period's payment. They can apply for that, and that's available on day one.
Oh, well, that's very important, isn't it? So that's a very big change. Just to get that plain, that's a very big change because, of course, one of the things that is meant to happen under this system is you wait anyway. You're paid in arrears, you get a week, and then you wait a full month. So 5 weeks is roughly the time that people are waiting, and that is too much for quite a few. And you're saying you've really altered that.
Well, what we said, we have, of course, listened, and what we've made sure now is that you can get on day one, if that's what you require, 100% of the advance of your estimated first period's payment. We've also made sure that people on housing benefit are able to get an extra 2 weeks worth of money to help them transition onto universal credit, and this isn't money that has to be paid back. And we've also removed the 7-day waiting period. And I have to say to you that all of these measures have actually been welcomed by stakeholders like Gingerbread, like Citizens Advice, like the National Housing Federation. And critically, if you look at the report that the NAO has put out, these measures were put in place after the work that they've done. So we've not seen the full impact of these very positive changes.
All right, but you would accept, wouldn't you, that actually these changes that have been made should have been there right from the beginning because the system would have worked better for the people it's meant to work well for?
Justin, we have a test and learn approach with universal credit, and I think the key thing is that we listen and we make changes to support people.
The government's being warned. I mean, right back in the coalition when Ian Duncan Smith invented this system, there was a warning that paying people in arrears who were very poor wasn't going to work, and you've accepted it now, it seems, but very, very belatedly. That's the point that a number of these groups, indeed the National Audit Office, make, that it's too defensive, that actually you need to get out ahead now and realise the difficulties in the system.
Well, let's talk about the system that universal credit is replacing. You yourself have said we've rolled 6 benefits into one instead of 3 organisations administering the benefits, HMRC, DWP and local authorities. That's been rolled into one. And actually, what we've also done with universal credit is removed all those cliff edges, which were clear disincentives to take up work. And I can tell you, Justin, from talking to claimants around the country, I go and visit job centres, I talk to claimants, I talk to the people working there, and what they tell me is this is a simpler system, it's helping them get into work, and it's working for them.
The National Audit Office say you will never be able to measure whether you achieve your stated goal of increasing employment because of this system. That's true, isn't it?
Well, the modelling that we have done has been independently scrutinised by, of course, the Treasury and the Infrastructure and Projects Authority. And the methodology that we have used for modelling was looked at by the Institute for Fiscal Studies back in 2012.
But it doesn't work.
But let me finish. They specifically looked at the extra number of people in work due to changed financial incentives. And what they said at the time, in terms of numbers, is that the estimates we've made were within the plausible range. Now, if you look, what we've also done subsequently is put out analysis which shows that actually, if you are on universal credit, after 6 months, you are 4 times more likely to be in work than if you are on legacy benefits.
Do you accept what the NAO says, which is that we will never know whether more people are in work or not as a result of universal benefit? We will never know. Do you accept that?
I mean, what we have put forward is figures which show estimates. I mean, with respect...
Do you accept what the NAO say?
Justin, with respect to the NAO, unless they're clairvoyants, they can't know the impact of this either. So it is an assertion.
So nobody does.
It's absolutely, it's an assertion that they're making. But let's just look at what has happened to the system. It is simpler. People are getting into work. And actually, we put out an analysis last week which showed that actually, if you're a claimant, you come onto universal credit, within 9 months, you are likely to have double your chances of being in work. This is a positive benefit which is transforming people's lives. And that is something that I hear up and down the country. I have to say to you, Justin, that I talk to people who are work coaches, and what they say to me around the country is that for the first time in their lives, they're actually doing what they came in to do, which is to help people into work, to help them increase their earnings, rather than explaining a really complicated legacy system.
Alok Sharma, thank you very much.
Thank you.